Dear students, now we are going to discuss about conservation. Conservation means protection, preservation. Biodiversity conservation. What is meant by biodiversity? Bio means living things, both plants and animals. Diversity means various types of plants, various types of animals. How do we protect? So, the preservation or protection of these various plants and animals under the control is called as biodiversity conservation. These biodiversity conservations are broadly divided into two categories, namely in situ and ex situ protection. What do you mean by in situ protection? Protection of the plants or animals in their own habitat itself, where they are living. So in that place itself, if you are protecting, this is called as in situ protection. What is ex situ protection? Ex situ protection, to protect the plants or animals or seeds or fruits, or the cryopreservation can be done in artificial place. So the place in which will be resemble with their own habitat. So artificially, if you make a place in which, if you make to preserve or protecting these plants or animals in a particular area, is called as ex situ protection. These in situ protection or protected area network will be broadly divided into two categories: community protector or government protector. Community protector means the people or the society protecting by themselves these plants and animals in the form of forest. Sacred groves or sacred lakes. Sacred groves are nothing but it is a hills or forest which will be protected by the community people because of their beliefs on gods. They thought that these are the mountain or the hills or the forest or the lakes, even lakes. The lakes which will be resembled with the god like Amman or with various types of Ayana. So they believe that this is God. That's why they used to be worshipped. They won't be destroyed. They used to be protected. So this is naturally protected by the people. This is community protected. These are also called sacred grove or sacred lands. So government organization is protecting these plants and animals in three different forms: biosphere reserves, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries. So these are all the plants and animal places naturally where they are living to protect by themselves in a particular area in the forest itself. Bioreserves, once again, it is divided into two types: terrestrial and marine. Terrestrial means on land, marine means on sea water. So once again, bioreserves. Biosphere reserves means the plant species and animal species which are available in marine water as well as terrestrial land to be protected in biosphere reserves. The preservation of biospheres are biosphere reserve of Gulf of Mannar. It's a very good example for marine reserves. Then ex situ protection. Ex situ protection is divided into three different categories. One is sacred plant home garden. Home garden is an artificial place, it is not natural place. We are rearing various plants. Due to this, various birds, insects can be able to survive. So in such a way, we can be able to conserve the biodiversity. Similarly, seed bank, pollen bank, field gene, cryopreservation, tissue culture, these are all also will be considered as ex situ protection. Botanical garden, arboretum, zoological park, zoo, aquarium, these are all comes under ex situ protection. So these are all flow charts on biodiversity conservation. How this biodiversity conservation will be protecting the natural wild species of plants and animals. India, due to its topography, geology and climatic patterns, has diverse life forms. Now this huge diversity is under threat due to many environmental issues. For this conservation becomes an important tool by which we can reduce many species getting lost from our native land. By employing conservation management strategies like germplasm conservation, in situ protection, ex situ protection, in vitro culture method, the endemic as well as threatened species can be protected in such a manner. First of all, we are going to discuss in detail about in situ protection or in situ conservation. What do you mean by in situ conservation? In situ conservation means the conserving the natural biotic community, whether it is plants or animals, in the natural habitat. The resources or genetic resources to be protected in their own natural habitat. If you protect by us as well as from other people, then this will be called as, what do you call it? In situ protection. So, in situ protection conservation means it is a conservation and management of genetic resources in their natural habitats. Here the plant or animal species are protected within the existing habitat. Forest trees, medicinal plants or aromatic plants under threat are conserved by this method. This is carried out by the community or by the state conservation, which include wildlife, national park or biosphere reserves, which will be protecting these plants and animals. The ecological unique and biodiversity rich regions are legally protected as wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, biosphere reserves. For example, Megamalai, Satyamangalam Wildlife Sanctuary, Gindi National Park, Periyar National Park, and Western Ghats, Merku Todachchi Malai, Nilgiris, Neelamani, Ooty, Agastyamalai, and Gulf of Mannar, all the biosphere reserves of Tamil Nadu. These are all in situ protection. Now we are going to see about sacred groves. Sacred groves means it is a small hill or mountain or a small forest which will be protected by the community of the people due to their beliefs on gods like Ayana or like Amman are available, or the god or goddess are living in the particular hills or forest. That is why they are protecting the forest. No one will felling the trees or killing the animals which are available. These protection will be called as sacred groves. So these are the batches or groups of cultivated trees which are community protected and are based on strong religious beliefs system, which usually have a significant religious connotation for protecting community. Each group is an abode of deity, mostly village god or goddess like Ayyanar or Amman. There are about 448 groves were documented throughout in Tamil Nadu, of which 6 groves were taken up for detailed floristic and faunistic studies. 6 groves like Panagudi Sola, Thirukurungudi, similarly Udayangudi Kadu, Sittanavasal, Pudupettai, Devadanam. These are all 6 places were taken up a detailed floristic and faunistic studies. These groups provide a number of ecosystem services to the neighborhood, like protecting the watershed, fodder, medicinal plants and microclimatic control as well. So next category is ex situ conservation. Ex situ conservation is a conservation which will be given an artificial habitat. So it is a method of conservation where the species are protected outside the natural environment. This includes establishment of botanical garden or zoological park, conservation strategies such as gene, pollen, seed, in vitro conservation, cryopreservation, seed-linked tissue culture and DNA bank. These facilities not only providing housing and care for endangered species but also have educational and recreational value for the society. We can visit the place. We can entertain as a picnic or tourism. So in such a way, we can able to protect ex situ protection. Next we are going to see conservation movement. The community level participation can help in preservation and conservation of our environment, because each and every one of the village and the people, those are living in the society, have to be take the responsibility to protect the forest and plants. Our environment is a common treasure. We can able to take how much we want for all living organisms on the earth. Every individual should be aware of this and participate actively in the programs meant for the conservation of local environment. Indian history has witnessed many people movement for the protection of environment. Lot of example we can able to see. First example, Chipko movement. Chipko movement which have been formed by Sundarlal Bahuguna. Actually, it was not originally formed by Sundarlal Bahuguna. The tribal people who are lived in Himalayan hills, they used to hug the trees because some of the sports company, so cricket bat can be constructed in a wood like willow tree. So willow trees are available in Himalayan hills. Some of the people, most of the people, they belongs to the sports, sports devices making company. They invaded the Himalayan hills. They tried to fell the trees. But the people, tribal people, those who are living in that Himalayan hills, they hug the trees. Don't kill our neighbors. Don't kill our daughters and sons. In such a way, they have protected the trees. They prevent the felling of trees in Himalayan hills. Later on, this was made as a Chipko movement. So the tribal women of Himalayan protested against the exploitation of the forest in the year 1972. Later on, it transformed into Chipko movement. It's a very important question. What is Chipko movement? By Sundarlal Bahuguna in the year 1974 in Mandal village of Chamari district in Himalaya. People protested by hugging trees together which were felled by the sports goods company. Main features of Chipko movements were this movement remained non-political. It was not formed by politician people. It is a people of the society, the people of tribal area, the people of the forest. It was voluntary movement. It was not forced. It was a voluntary movement based on Gandhian thought. It was concerned with the ecological balance of the nature. Main aim of Chipko movement was to give a slogan of 5 F's. What are the 5 F's? First F for food, second F for fodder, third F for fuel, fourth F for fiber, fifth F for fertilizers. So food, fodder, fuel, fiber, fertilizers. These are 5 F's. So first, the main aim of this Chipko movement is these 5 F's to make the community self-sufficient in all their basic needs. So this is the main aim of Chipko movement. The similar movement is also done in Karnataka. That is called Apiko movement. This is Chipko movement. That is Apiko movement. The famous Chipko Andolan of Uttarakhand in the Himalayas inspired the villages of Uttar Karnataka to launch a similar movement to save their forest. This movement started in Gubi Gade, a small village near Sirsi in Karnataka, by Panduranga Hegde. This movement started to protest against felling of trees, monoculture, forestry policy, as well as deforestation. So these are the two important movements, Chipko movement and Apiko movement. The people have been utilized it to protect and conserve the forest. Next we are going to see about endemic center and endemic plants. What is endemic plant or endemic center? Endemic plant or endemic center is nothing but these are the group of plants and animals. They exist only in a certain geographical region. They might not be available anywhere else other than that place. So this is called as endemic center or endemic plants. So endemic species are the plants and animals that exist only in one geographical region. Species can be endemic to large or small areas of the earth. Some are endemic to a particular continent, some are the part of continent, and others to a single island. So any species found restricted to a specific geographical area is referred as endemic. It may be due to various reasons such as isolation, interspecific interaction, seeds dispersal problems, site specificity, and many other environmental and ecological problems. So due to this endemic nature might be occur. There are 3 mega centers of endemism and 27 micro-endemic centers in India. Approximately 1/3 of Indian flora have been identified as endemic and found restricted and distributed in 3 major phytogeographical regions of India. That is in Indian Himalayas, Peninsular India. Peninsular India means Takkana Bhumi. So in the lower belt around Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, these all the states will be included in Peninsular India. Similarly, Andaman Nicobar Island as well. So Peninsular India, especially Western Ghats, Mekku Todorchi Malai, has high concentration of endemic plants. Certain plants like Harvickia pinnata and Pentickia Kandapanna are good examples for endemic plants. A large percentage of endemic species are herbs and belong to the families such as Poaceae, grass family, Apiaceae, Asteraceae, and Orchidaceae. So look at the picture. These are 2 important endemic plants. This is Pentickia Kandapanna. This is Pecaria carthalensis. So these are the endemic species. These are available in a particular area only. Some other example. The southern western Ghats are having Pecuria, these plants. The Peninsula India, Agastya Malai, Pauciflora. The Peninsula and northern India are having Harvickia pinnata. Similarly, western Ghats of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. This plant is called Pentickia cartapanna. The Khasi Hills in Meghalaya, certain Nepenthes, it is an insectivorous plant. These are solely available in Meghalaya and Khasi Hills. So these are certain examples. So majority of endemic species are threatened due to their narrow specific habitat. Majority of endemic species are threatened due to their narrow specific habitat, reduced seed production, low dispersal rate, less viable nature, and human interference. These are some of the endemic nature. Serious efforts need to be undertaken for their conservation, otherwise these species may become globally extinct. Very carefully we have to be protected. Next we are going to see about carbon capture storage. What is carbon capture storage? As you know very well about the importance of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. If carbon dioxide is increased in the atmospheric air, global warming will be happen. Greenhouse effect will be happen. So what happened? These carbon dioxide which are released in the industries and various power plant have to be injected these carbon dioxide inside the depth of 1 kilometer below the underground rock. So this is called as carbon capture storage. So carbon capture and storage, CCS, is a technology of capturing carbon dioxide and injected it deep into the underground rocks into a depth of 1 kilometer or more, and it is an approach to mitigate global warming, to minimize the global warming by capturing carbon dioxide from large point sources such as industries and power plant and subsequently storing it instead of releasing it into the atmosphere. So lot of carbon dioxide might be released from various factories and industries. They have to be do this type of techniques, that is called carbon capture techniques, to capturing this carbon dioxide and injected into the deep inside the underground earth, more than 1 kilometer far away. This is called as carbon capture storage or CCS. So various safe sites have been selected for permanent storage of in various deep geological formation, liquid storage in ocean and solid storage by reduction of carbon dioxide with metal oxide to produce stable carbonates. So in this method, the carbon dioxide will be made to react with various metal to form carbonates. These are a solid carbon dioxide capture. Similarly, liquid carbon dioxide capture is also done in various types of ocean. So it is also known as geological sequestration, which involves injecting carbon dioxide directly into the underground geological formations such as declining oil fields, gas field, salines, aquifers, and unmineral coal have been suggested as storage site. Next we are going to see about carbon sequestration. What is meant by carbon sequestration? Same thing. The carbon dioxide, if it is available in the atmosphere, which may cause global warming. So if this carbon dioxide is taken up by the plants, if you plant more plants, they can absorb this carbon dioxide for the process of photosynthesis. So during photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is necessary. So all the carbon dioxide will be absorbed by the plant. This carbon dioxide, instead of present in the atmosphere, if it is present in the plant, then this is called as carbon sequestration. So carbon sequestration is the process of capturing and storing carbon dioxide, which reduces the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere with a goal of reducing global climate change. Carbon sequestration occurs naturally by plants and in ocean. Terrestrial sequestration is a typical accomplished through forest and soil conservation. Soil conservation practices that enhance the storage of carbon as well. As an example of mycoloids, such as species like Chlorella, Cinedesmesa, Crocococcus, Chlamydomonas are used globally for carbon dioxide sequestration. Trees like Eugenia caryophyllata, Tecumseh, Cinnamon verum have high capacity and noted to sequester carbon. Nitrocolloid and marine grasses and mangroves are also have ability to mitigate or minimize the carbon dioxide which are available in the atmosphere. Next one is called as carbon footprint. What is meant by carbon footprint? Suppose if you walk on the sand, what will happen? There is a footprint will be fall on your footsteps. Similarly, if you are living in the world, you are using lot of things. Lot of work have been done. You are taking food, you are working, you are playing, you are enjoying, you are playing video game, you are using cell phone, you are using laptop. All these things are releasing or emitting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. These are all making a carbon footprint. That means how much amount of carbon dioxide you are releasing every day, you are releasing every year. This will be forming like a footsteps or print like footprint. This is called as carbon footprint. Every human activity leaves a mark just like our footprint. This carbon footprint is total amount of greenhouse gases produced by human activities such as even agriculture. If you are doing agriculture also will produce a carbon footprint. And industries, deforestation, waste disposal, burning of fossil fuel, directly or indirectly. Whatever the process you are doing, every process will release carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. These are all will be evidence for your carbon footprint. Right? It can be measured for an individual or for a family or for an organization like industries, state level or national level. It is usually estimated and expressed in equivalent tons of carbon dioxide per year. The burning of fossil fuel releases carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. In turn, these emissions trap solar energy and thus increase the global temperature, resulting in ice melting in polar ice caps or glaciers, submerging the low-lying area, and imbalance in nature like cyclones, tsunamis, and extreme weather conditions also may cause. To reduce the carbon footprint, we can follow some practices like eating indigenous foods, fruits, product. Reduce use of your electrical devices. Reduce traveling. Do not buy fast and preserved processed packed food like Lay's, pocket food, all will producing more amount of carbon footprint. Plant a garden. Less consumption of meat and seafood. If you are taking more amount of mutton, chicken, fish, which will cause more amount of carbon footprint. Poultry requires little space, nutrients, and less pollution comparing to cattle farming. Then, so these are evidence of carbon footprint. I shall come back later on. Next, reduce use of laptops. If you use laptop for 8 hours, it releases nearly 2 kilograms of carbon dioxide annually. Line dry your clothes. If you buy imported fruits like kiwi, suppose if you are taking your fruits from your locally available, carbon footprint will be less. But if you are taking the fruit from imported like kiwi is a fruit which is come from New Zealand. So it is indirectly increasing carbon footprint. How? The fruit has traveled a long distance in shipping or airliner, thus emitting tons of carbon dioxide. So these are all the way in which may cause a lot of carbon footprint. So these are some example of carbon footprint. If you are taking beef and lamb, which will have more amount of carbon footprint. So this red mark, which dark red mark, cause more amount of carbon footprint. All processed food. If there is a canned food is available in the supermarket or pocket food is available in the supermarket, these are having more amount of footprint. Salmon fish, pork, cheese, these are having little less than these food. That means they are also having a red color carbon footprint. If you are taking egg and fish, organic rich omega, which will be producing a lot of carbon footprint. So if you are taking organic, high protein, good fat, more nutritious conventional food like beans, broccoli. Broccoli means a green color or a purple color cauliflower. Cauliflower like a vegetable which is called as broccoli. Yogurt, it's a milk product. Nuts, peanuts, butter, rice, potatoes. These are having less amount of carbon footprint. If you are taking vegetables, these are completely green. Tomato, vegetables, fruits, which are having low in fat and color is high in nutrients. These are having low footprint. If you are taking lentils, it is good, very good. So you will not have more amount of carbon footprint. Like protein, good choice of fiber and nutrients. So these are some examples for carbon footprint. Now we are going to see about biochar. Biochar is also, it is indirect carbon sequestration. So another long-term method of store carbon. Actually, carbon sequestration is nothing but carbon dioxide available in the atmosphere are temporarily stored in plants. So this is carbon sequestration. But biochar is a long-term storage. For example, during photosynthesis process, carbon dioxide will be absorbed by the plant. This carbon dioxide will be converted into chemical. Now the carbon is stored in plant. Then it is stored in the wood or the stem of the plant. If you burn incompletely. Some of the carbon will be stored in the charcoal only. And the karilaye irundum. So some of the carbon will be retained in the char, the coal. So this is called biochar. So biochar is another long-term method of store carbon to increase plant ability to store more carbon. Plants are partly burnt, such as crop waste, waste woods, to become carbon-rich, slow decomposing substances of material called biochar. It is a kind of charcoal used as a soil amendment. Biochar is a stable solid, rich in carbon, and can endure in soil for thousands of years. Like most charcoal, biochar is made from biomass via pyrolysis, which arrests wood from complete burning. Biochar thus has the potential to help mitigate or minimize the climate change via carbon sequestration. Independently, biochar when added to the soil can increase soil fertility of acidic soil, increase agricultural productivity, and provide protection against some foliar means leaves, and soil-borne diseases. It is a good method of preventing waste wood and logs getting decayed. Instead, we can convert them into biochar, thus converting them to carbon storage material. That's all about biochar. Next, we are going to see about rainwater harvesting. It is very important question, but easy as well. So this is rainwater harvesting is a solution to water crisis. Water crisis is an ecological problem and social problem as well. But this problem can be minimized. We can mitigate this ecological problem or social problem by rainwater harvesting. So rainwater harvesting can be done not only in towns and cities, but also in villages as well. So these are called as Uranis. So if you are doing rainwater harvesting in villages, these are also called as Uranis. So this picture will be helping us to understand how the rainwater harvesting can be done in rural as well as in urban area. So first of all, we shall go through rural area. So this is a roof of the village house. Here rainwater canal is there. This rainwater canal is connected with a pipeline which will be filtered by a sand filter. So this water will be drained in this filter, sand filter. After filtering it, this will be transferred to the water tank. From the water tank, slowly these are sedimented. Only the water will be poured into the borewell or underground water. So in such a way, we can harvest the rainwater. And moreover, the salt water, if it is present in our well or borewell, will be changed into useful water, drinking water. This will be converted into drinking water. That means the salinity of the water will be reduced by this rainwater harvesting in rural area. So this is the water harvesting system in urban area. So this is a terrace. From this terrace, lot of pipelines are connected. These pipelines are called as rainwater inlet. Through the rainwater inlet, the water will be collected from the terrace, make its way down a pipe. From this pipe, this will be entered into the suction tank. In the suction tank, the filter placed in the tank clears the water and impurities. Wherever the impurities are formed, this will be collected. The once again, this will be passed into a collection tank. In this collection tank, the filtered sensor then sends to the water tank again. So then, these are pure water. The rainwater is pure water than well water. But even though we are filtering, we are minimizing the pollution, then we can send back to the water tank. Then it will be supplied to the people. So this rainwater harvesting can be done both in rural as well as in urban. So rainwater harvesting is accumulation and storage rainwater for reuse in site rather than allowing it to run off. Rainwater can be collected from rivers, rooftops, and the water collected directly to a deep pit. The water percolate means pierce inside the soil and gets stored in pits. Rainwater harvesting is a suitable or sustainable water management practice implemented not only in urban area but also in agricultural field, which is an important economical cost effective method for the future. What are the environmental benefits of rainwater harvesting? It promotes adequacy of underground water and water conservation, mitigate the effect of drought, minimize the dryness, varachiye koraikkirathu, which is called as mitigate the effect of drought, reduces the soil erosion as the surface runoff is reduced, reduces flood hazards, improves groundwater quality and water table, decreases the salinity. So if there is any salt content in our water, will be minimized. No land might be wasted for storage purposes and no population displacement is necessary or involved. Storing water underground is an eco-friendly measure and a part of sustainable water storage strategy for local communities. Next we are going to see about importance of lakes. Lakes are very important water bodies, ponds, lakes, ditches, canals. These are all various freshwater water bodies. So water bodies like lakes, ponds not only provide us number of environmental benefits, but also they strengthen our economy as well as our quality of life like health. Lakes as a storage of rainwater provides drinking water, improves groundwater facilities level, preserve the freshwater biodiversity and habitat of the area wherein occurs. So lot of plants and animals will be survive and water bodies like a lake as a habitat. They use as habitat. The terms of services of lakes offer sustainable solution to key issues of water management and climatic influences and benefits like nutrient retention, influencing local rainfall, removal of pollutants, phosphorus and nitrogen, and most importantly carbon sequestration as well. That's all about rainwater harvesting and lake.